Making Monsters with Taylor Dahl. It's like beer and brats, a perfect combination.
You know the deal.
All right, welcome in everybody to another episode of Making Monsters. We're continuing on our off-season project of some of the potential picks for the Bears at pick 9, mainly is what we are focused on, but we are going to go a little beyond that because there are rumors that the Bears may trade back. There's also, obviously, they have picks later in the draft, so there's a lot of guys we can talk about. And when we're talking about Alabama football, I think that in general, every year we're talking about a lot of those Alabama players sitting here. And what better person to talk to today than Roger Hoover? He is the play-by-play broadcaster. He's the host. He's a sideline reporter, does a little bit of everything for Alabama Crimson Tide. So, Roger, thanks so much for hopping on with me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Taylor. It's great to reconnect once again and talk about NFL draft season, which for Alabama football fans is always really busy with all the amount of talent that Alabama's put in the NFL the last few years. But hopefully some good talent maybe on the way to Chicago. That'd be fun.
Yeah, it definitely would be. And for everybody listening, we know Roger here in Jacksonville because he was the original Jumbo Shrimp, where you did a little bit of everything there too, but you were the voice of the Jumbo Shrimp here in Jacksonville. And so we miss you here, but we're also super excited because you have a whole lot going on there in Alabama, and I know you love it. So let's get straight to this, Roger. One of the big needs for the Bears, when most people, if you ask them right now, 90% of people would probably say wide receiver and edge. Two positions that we kind of feel like if you add top players, blue chip players, top prospects in those two areas, that it would, not saying you're complete because I don't think any team's ever complete, but really put this Chicago Bears team to a point where they could compete at a high level next season. And so when you talk about Dallas Turner, that's what we're here to talk about to start off with. He 10 sacks, 14 and a half tackles for loss last season. And Roger, I don't even think those numbers technically even define what a huge piece Dallas Turner was on that defense. So talk a little bit about that, his role on the Dallas defense and how just big of a puzzle piece he was for them.
Well, he was great for Alabama from the time he stepped on the field as a freshman. He is able to come in and help out that team that won a national championship his first year there. And just really, once he became a regular contributor to the Crimson Tide defense, this defense was able to do some great things. I think Will Anderson Jr. on the other side of the line as an edge rusher, his profile was raised because teams were having to devote so many resources. Another tight end, and add that tackle sliding over a lot more, trying to block Dallas Turner. That allowed Will Anderson Jr. to have a lot of success. And then even when teams would game plan all around Will Anderson Jr., it was Dallas Turner who stepped up and got to the quarterback in a dynamic way. And even last year, without Will Anderson Jr. on the roster, Dallas Turner was getting the toughest assignments from the offensive line and tight ends each and every game, yet he's still got in the backfield, with you mentioned, with the 14 and a half sacks for loss, the 10 sacks that he had, and really some dynamic hits. I think everybody looks to that one play that he had against LSU when he had a hit that really knocked Jaden Daniels out of the ball game. A lot of people wanted targeting called in the play, and there was roughing the passer, but it was a clean, solid hit that he had on Jaden Daniels, and it took out the Heisman Trophy winner in the biggest game of the year for the LSU Tigers. That's the kind of physical force that he is each and every game, and he's also a great leader. He was counted on as one of the leaders for this Crimson Tide football team this past year, and that's a really tough assignment, getting on the leadership council and then being asked to be a team captain for a Nick Saban coach team. He has very high standards for who he wants in leadership positions on his teams, and for Dallas Turner to be able to make that transition and lead this football team through what might have been the most tumultuous up and down season Alabama football has had in the Saban era, for it still to be an SEC championship winning team and one play away from tying up the Rose Bowl and who knows, possibly going on and winning another national championship. I think that says a lot about the character of Dallas Turner, that he was able to be one of the key steady leaders for a team that had its ups and downs earlier in the season and then went perfect in SEC play after that, beat a very good Georgia team for the national championship. So, I mean, Dallas Turner to me is the complete package. When you look at physicality he has, the way he's able to quickly get off the edge and get to the quarterback, get to running backs in the backfield, tackle them for a loss, and then off the field be a leader as well and be the kind of representative you want of your football program. I think he's got it all.
You mentioned just the start, and he pretty much came out of the gates hot. 8.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss that first year in 2020 for him as a freshman. How much of that, because I didn't even think about it in this factor, not saying, you mentioned the attention Will Anderson was getting, and now obviously people know that listen to Making Monsters, I also cover the Jags, so I get to see Will Anderson very close. He's an absolute beast of a human. How much do you think Will Anderson factored into Dallas Turner, not only kind of taking some attention, but also just kind of mentoring him into the player he turned out to be right now.
Yeah, they worked together very closely as a very good teammate relationship that they had all throughout their time together in Tuscaloosa. And again, I think they realized that they made each other better at times. Dallas Turner made Will Anderson Jr. again a lot better during his years in Tuscaloosa. But I think in that competitiveness as well, neither one of them wanted to be the one with fewer sacks or fewer tackles for a loss. Like they were very, very competitive in both practice and during games with each other. So I think that says a lot again about Dallas Turner and the way that he was able to make that impact as a true freshman in a very tough circumstance. You have to remember that 2020 season was the COVID season. He did not fully get to go through spring practice. Summer camp was really different than it normally is. And then it was an all SEC schedule that Alabama played that year. So there were no gimme games to kind of ease your way into playing college football. They were playing Georgia week number 3 of the season that year. Yeah. It was a tremendous challenge for everybody, especially freshmen making that transition to college football, and he made it flawlessly.
Yeah, when you look at the next season, Roger, when you look statistically, there was a drop off statistically when it comes to sacks, when it comes to tackles for loss. I don't think people who watched Alabama on a weekly basis thought that Dallas Turner got worse. But if you just look at a box score, stat sheet, people may question that. So what are maybe some of the reasonings behind that? What was going on with Alabama's defense at that point to where maybe that what was a double-digit sack season kind of decreased a little bit?
Well, the defense had a tougher time that year. They lost some key leadership, especially in the middle linebacker position. So the defense didn't quite play on the same page all throughout the season. And Alabama had to face some adversity, lost on the road against Texas A&M, had some other close calls along the way in 2021. And that was also the year that Will Anderson Jr. kind of separated himself from the pack, it seemed like. And no matter what opponents were able to do trying to block him, he was getting in the backfield. And a lot of our opinions, he should have been one of the Heisman Trophy finalists that year. I mean, he was that good on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So, the numbers maybe didn't bear that out, what Dallas Turner was doing as much that season, but it was not the strongest defense that Alabama's had. It was a defense that maybe are kind of around him because, again, I think he was solid. I think Will Anderson Jr. was solid, but at some other key spots, specifically the secondary, Alabama just wasn't as strong that year. And if it had been just a little bit stronger, that's another national championship winning team. They're probably able to hang on to that lead that they had in the fourth quarter against Georgia in the national championship game. But he was still making strides. It just didn't really show up on the stat sheet as much. And again, so much of that defense was Will Anderson Jr. that year.
Yeah. When you bounce up to 2023 season, he's mocked in the top 10. Pretty much any mock draft you see has Dallas Turner going in the top 10. And when you point to that, you look at a lot of the season and his strengths and everything that kind of developed these 3 years at Alabama, which is one of Alabama's strengths when it comes to finding these guys, but also developing them and making them the best possible players to enter the NFL. So it's always fun to watch that and watch that development. But when you look at this last season with, I almost said Will Anderson because we talked about him so much, with Dallas Turner, what was it for you that you felt increased the most between this 3 years that really separated this season for him to where now we are looking at him as a top 10, top 8, top 7 prospect?
I think just his physicality, he kept getting bigger, faster, and stronger during his time in Tuscaloosa. And again, he had some really good help around him. I thought Alabama had a good defensive line this year. And then on the other side, Chris Braswell kind of went in the spot that Dallas had all throughout his time on the other side of the line of scrimmage. With Will Anderson Jr. gone now, that became Dallas Turner's spot really to shine. And again, those guys were very effective getting to the quarterback and played with a lot of speed. And he really was the leader. I think just being the top guy on that defense and going into the season, he went to SEC media days. He talked about how much he relished that leadership role for this defense. I think that all paid off in what turned out to be a tremendous season for him with the Crimson Tide in 2023.
I think that one of the big things that we're looking at for the Bears personally, like I said, edge is definitely one of the position groups that we want to target. And another name that kind of lingers around that area is Jared Verse. A lot of people lean towards Jared Verse because of, they say, his versatility, him able to set the edge, him able to rush the passer, and maybe just his fit in what Eberflus likes to do in Chicago a little bit. But what would you say about Dallas Turner when it comes to being able to do multiple things and not just be the guy that rushes the passer?
Well, he was pretty good in pass coverage too. I mean, he could drop back and cover running backs and especially tight ends extremely well. And he was also very good defending the run. Especially in the SEC, there are a lot of teams like Georgia that love to run the football, and that's kind of their MO. And he helped shut down a very good Georgia team in the SEC championship game this past year. He's a very multiple player, and I think Coach Saban always really tries to get that out of his players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, getting them almost ready for anything. I think we really saw that all throughout Dallas Turner's time in Tuscaloosa. And again, he's not just, pass rush only. He can be very, very multiple. And again, I thought he did great defending against the pass or the run throughout his time here.
That's definitely something we want to hear because, like I said, it's been one of kind of the things that have gone back and forth of maybe leaning towards Verse, but then also a lot of people don't think Verse is technically worth the 9th pick. They definitely say Dallas Turner's worth 9, but is he able to kind of have that duality of what rushing the passer has turned into the NFL? You mentioned another on the other side. You had Chris Braswell. Tell us a little bit about him because he's somebody that maybe a little bit later in the draft. If let's say the Bears decide to go wide receiver at 9, if they end up Roma Dunze or someone sitting there and they can get one of those guys and then maybe knock off an edge a little later. He's a name that's kind of popped up. Tell us about him, his strengths, how his role he kind of played on that defense too.
Well, he's very physical. He's a very large specimen coming around the edge, and he was somebody that kind of quietly made plays at times. So they called it the cheetah package when you had Will Anderson Jr., Dallas Turner, and Chris Braswell on the field at the same time in 2022. I mean, they were just so fast getting the quarterback, and Braswell really physically was one of the strongest men on that field for the Crimson Tide. So he's somebody that maybe doesn't have the speed and the quickness of a Dallas Turner, but he certainly has the strength, and he certainly does a great job stopping the run. I was always impressed by his ability to do that, and he helped make Dallas Turner better, similar to how Dallas made Will Anderson Jr. better. He took a lot of attention away, especially some huge, heavy tight ends, left tackles. They had to focus on Chris Braswell. That allowed Dallas Turner to have success on the other side of the edge rush. Braswell is a load. I mean, he is somebody I think is going to play in the NFL for a long time, and he went under the radar so much behind Dallas Turner and Will Anderson Jr. during his time here, but he was a solid playmaker. I know Coach Saban absolutely loved what he brought in practice each and every day along with the game. So he's another person to look out for because if he stays healthy, he could have a very long career in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about whatever edge does come to Chicago, that Chicago made the trade last year midseason to get Montez Sweat on one side of the line, and that's why it kind of feels like if you just can get somebody on the other side of cross from Montez Sweat, not only is Montez already going to take some attention away from you because he's an absolute beast too, a name that other SEC, if you're familiar with in the SEC, Javon Dexter in the middle is someone that we were able to see a lot in the interior that's been able to take a step up, but it was just that other side that was lacking last year, and it almost felt like they knew that, and a lot of teams took advantage of that side of the defensive line. So let's switch over to the offense. Like I said, the other probably big target position that the Bears do need is wide receiver. Some people would argue they don't because they have DJ Moore. They just added Keenan Allen. And so some people are saying, hey, it's really not that big of a need. Let's address some other things, get wide receiver later, which could be a choice for where we're going here. Jermaine Burton. Tell us a little bit about Burton because I feel like maybe so much focus was on Alabama's defense that maybe a lot of people don't know a whole lot about offensively of what really made them tick last year.
Yeah, Jermaine Burton, a dynamic playmaker, and he's somebody that kind of went through some ups and downs in terms of his productivity in Tuscaloosa throughout the 2 years he had. He became a pretty regular target of Bryce Young in 2022, made some great catches for Alabama that season. This past year was really up and down for the Crimson Tide passing game, especially early in the season as Jalen Milroe got established early on as a starting quarterback and then did not start in the South Florida game, week 3, which Alabama almost lost down on the road in Tampa, but then Milroe got the job back with the Ole Miss game, and kind of from the second half of the Ole Miss game on, Alabama was a much better team. Milroe stayed in the starting quarterback position for the rest of the year. So with that, Burton, again, had his production kind of be up and down depending on how the quarterback position was being played. Again, he was a very favorite target of Bryce Young before that in 2022 when he first came over from the University of Georgia. He has the experience of beating Alabama in the national championship game one year and then going right to the Crimson Tide the next year. But again, he's a very emotional player. That was one thing that I think Alabama fans at times didn't like if it caused a penalty or anything like that. But he would talk to the opponents a little bit, most notably in the Texas A&M game. He got very animated this past year when he made some good plays. But he is a good player. I mean, he's a kind of player you want on your side because he is somebody that's very emotional, plays with an edge, and I think that really came through in a lot of good moments for him this past year. So he's somebody that can physically kind of handle everything, very good with the route tree, but he's just a dynamic playmaker. And again, maybe he's not the top of the line talent in terms of wide receiver, but he's very solid, very reliable, and I think he's going to mature into being a long-term NFL player. It's going to be fascinating to see what his journey looks like.
Now, what about size-wise from him? What type of wide receiver? Because when we put all these different tallies on wide receivers, and if they're, a contested catch guy, an outside guy, a deep threat guy, a slot guy, where would you say he fits best on a football field in the NFL?
Maybe in the NFL, go a little more slot. Alabama kind of used him in a variety of directions, especially with the rest of the wide receiving core trying to step up in the last couple of years. The talent level from the years where you had Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy had slipped just a little bit in the last 2 or 3 years, but Jermaine Burton was kind of at the top of the list for the Crimson Tide. So I think maybe with his size, maybe a little more slot. Again, I'm no football expert, but I think in the NFL, he could find a role there. And he's somebody that in a pinch, you can have kind of play all different roles because, again, we got to see that with Alabama just physically. That would be my first guess about where he would project best.
Now, before I get to one of the final guys that I want to talk about, just because you did mention Bryce Young, and we saw his struggles this last season, a lot seemed to he had no protection whatsoever on the offensive line, not many weapons to throw to. But now the Bears are looking at yet again another starting quarterback. Justin Fields gets traded away. It was a very split talk in Chicago for a while of keep Justin or get rid of Justin. Looks like Caleb Williams will be the pick. What are I know it's not a SEC guy, but what are your thoughts on Caleb when it comes to maybe that transition now that you've seen Bryce Young go from what he was able to do in college and then struggles year one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him because physically, again, Caleb is somebody that can handle everything, it seems like, that is thrown at him. I don't think he was facing the best competition in the world when he was at Southern California. Certainly a lot different than what he would have seen like he had been in Bryce Young's shoes playing for the University of Alabama and going up against an SEC defense game in and game out. But Caleb Williams has the arm strength. He's got the foot speed. I mean, he's very, very fast on the field. I think he is a good dynamic playmaker. It's just going to be interesting to see, how does he go from the jump of playing Pac-12 football, which is, among the power conferences in college football, but it's definitely not the elite speed that you see, say, in the Southeastern Conference or even in the Big Ten, as we're seeing in the last few years. So how he makes that transition, I think, is going to be tough to tell.
Yeah, or that the Pac-12 goodbye party they had this year because they just decided to go all out in the Pac-12. And that's what a lot of the guys I've been covering for my mock draft. I'm like, another Pac-12 guy, another Pac-12 guy. It's been kind of fun to branch out past the SEC a little bit. So, yeah, the next one I want to talk about a little bit, tackle J.C. Latham. He is somebody that, from what I've seen, the Chargers love him. The Chargers, a lot of talk. I've been talking about trading back and getting J.C. Latham. They want some protection for Justin Herbert. I think that the Bears, they got Darnell Wright last year. They have a guy, Braxton Jones, from a couple years ago that's really made some strides. Tevin Jenkins, one of the better offensive linemen in the league when he's healthy. But it leaves a couple gaps in the middle. And so that's where it brings this question where some Bears fans are like, okay, well, let's solidify this offensive line and make it one that is for the future and that doesn't put Caleb Williams in a position that Justin Fields had been in, because Justin Fields has been sacked almost 100 times the last 2 seasons, and you do not want another quarterback to go through that. This is someone, he came in, he claimed that starting right tackle spot in 2022, gained some weight, gained some strength, came back last year, took that spot right over again. It kind of became his baby, that right tackle spot at Alabama. So tell us a little bit about that and what you saw from him when he really did start making his mark on the line.
Well, just great strength. I mean, he is a large human being, and again, he's very difficult to move, but he also had pretty good footwork throughout his time at Alabama, and I think he really shored up that right side. Caden Proctor was the left tackle for the Crimson Tide this past year, who almost it was almost too big at times, and funny enough, through the transfer portal, he left to go to Iowa. Now he's coming back to Alabama after spending 3 months in Iowa City. Funny how that works out, but
when he realized they don't. When you realize they do not play offense there.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But anyway, Alabama really didn't have to worry about the right side of the line very much with what we were seeing, thanks to J.C. Latham. Again, he was very, very consistent, game in, game out, kind of went about his game like a pro, even though he was playing college football. The last few years, Alabama's had Eric Wolford as its offensive line coach. He did a great job before that at the University of Kentucky, getting some guys to the NFL. And J.C. only got better, it seemed like, playing for Coach Wolford over the last few years. And he was another leader. He was another really good leader of this team. Again, represented Alabama at SEC Media Days last year. He's got a fun personality. He gets to show that a little bit on social media. So I think he'd become a fan favorite of any team that drafts him coming up this year, in addition to his good play on the field.
I love that. It's funny how the offensive linemen, I feel like recently, especially in Chicago, have just become kind of fan favorites in general. Tevin Jenkins' personality, everybody loves it. And he's just kind of that teddy bear, I call him, because off the field, he's very goofy and fun and always kidding around. But then when he's on the football field, he's the first one to protect the quarterback. He's the first one to kind of start getting angry if things aren't going their way, not in a negative way, but in the light, you kind of want to see that fire side of them. And so you love seeing the offensive linemen like that. What about when you think about him being in front of a guy like Caleb Williams? Caleb Williams also obviously is a very unique quarterback. We're not sure how much of that gimmicky Lincoln Riley stuff is going to actually be done in the NFL. A lot of people, like he even mentioned himself, he wants to throw the ball. He wants to get the ball to his wide receivers. He doesn't want to have to run around and do all these quirky, fun, crazy things. But his ability to do that also makes things a little bit harder on your offensive line. If you're holding the ball too long, they're having to hold their blocks longer. How do you think he would fare in front of a quarterback who does kind of move around a little bit more outside that pocket?
I think he will play extremely well if he's given an opportunity like that. But the one caveat I'd have is, how does he adjust to playing in front of NFL defenses? I think being able to keep the quarterback clean is something that's really just dependent on, again, how does he make that transition to going up against the best defensive linemen and edge rushers in the NFL? I think that is the tough ask at this point, and it may take a year or so, I think, for him to gain his footing. But I do think he's got the skills to make all that happen. I'm more concerned about how the transition would be the first year for him in a spot like that, but I do think he is definitely capable.
Definitely would make some fans excited, Roger. I think the big question here before I let you go, are they still mourning in Tuscaloosa, or have we moved on to Kalen DeBoer and we're all right?
I think the fan base has really rallied around Coach DeBoer. We just had our spring football game on Saturday, and 72,000 fans showed up. It was really great seeing at the Walk of Champions, which a lot of people have said, when the team buses open at the end of Bryant-Denny Stadium, they have that long walk over all the national championship monuments. That was one of the largest crowds they've had there for that event in a long, long time. So I think the energy certainly is there. Definitely, Coach Saban's a legend that Alabama is still paying tribute to, and he was back in town this weekend getting his SEC championship ring and kind of seeing off the senior class who are having their handprints and cleat marks put in cement to the base of Denny Chimes on campus. A great honor for the captains that we have here at Alabama. So he's still been around just a little bit, but I think everybody is really excited about the direction this program is going in. Some things are changing, but it's not dramatic changes so far with Kalen DeBoer, and it's really going to be interesting to see how the transfer portal process plays out here over the next 2 weeks, as now a lot of players are going to start making their way to Tuscaloosa, and I think he has a pretty good idea who he wants to target to put on this roster, and we just can't wait for this fall. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. The schedule is going to be great once again from the SEC, and we even get to go on the road up to Big Ten country at Wisconsin, I believe, in week number 2. So that's going to be a really good trip as we all get to jump around up there and hopefully see Alabama continue playing good football and pick up a win.
It'll be fun. Washington was a really fun football team to watch this last season. It's a lot of the players also that I've been talking about. And it's interesting too, when you just look at this season with just, let's say, within the last 3-4 months, Kentucky with Coach Cal, Nick Saban, and Bill Belichick are all not where they were 1 year ago. And it's iconic names all across the board. So times are changing in sports in general. We're getting to that time where, like, everybody when I grew up watching is starting to kind of make their way out, and we're seeing this new world of sports come in, but it's fun. And I don't see a school like Alabama struggling, because I feel like they've been able to build such a powerhouse there that I don't see that ending anytime soon. And that Saban definitely built something to last.
Yeah, he really did. And again, every team right now in the SEC and the Big Ten is in really good position for the future. I think there's a lot of doubts and a lot of concerns for teams that are outside those two conferences about what college football could look like, especially with these leagues working so closely together on the future of college athletics. So again, it's good to be with a program like Alabama right now because there are some uncertain times ahead for college athletics, but I think everybody here feels pretty strongly, and it's going to be different without Coach Saban. We're certainly going to miss a lot of the Sabanisms and a lot of the structure that he had with this program. But again, everyone's really positive about the steps we've already seen from Kalen DeBoer, and we just can't wait for the fall.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything but good things when I talked to Washington Huskies about Kalen DeBoer. So good luck this season, and thanks so much, Roger, for hopping on with me. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we miss you here in Jacksonville, but congrats with everything, and keep going up there.
Yeah, I miss it in Jacksonville a lot, especially the beach and Taco Lou, all the great golf, all my favorite spots that I had over my 8 years there. But you guys keep it rocking down in Duval.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Taylor. See ya.